again. Excellent. I think we'll share the screen. Take a look at this. Wrong one. Stop and go to the other one. Okay, can you see where it says planning and a big purple stripe across the bottom?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So this is out of the 15 IRC, but I do not believe there have been any changes. If you will notice, we were going through the code and there are a bunch of numbers that referred back to this 300 section or chapter 3. Over here on the right, I'm not. You can read through the plans, permits, inspections, et cetera. But over here, building location, and so that fire. I don't know what happened there. Okay. Anyway, like I said, my mouse and I don't get along very well. But for these fire separation distances, these FSDs, here's a picture, I think, that shows things a little better. On the left, we have a non-sprinklered building. On the right, we have a sprinklered building. Just to be clear, most new buildings, although accessory dwelling units are exempted, but most new residential structures need to be sprinkled. So that LL between the two, that stands for lot line. Why they didn't call it a property line, I don't know. But anyway, LL is lot line. And on the right, you see 0 to 3 feet. You need a 1 hour fire rating for the walls. You're not allowed to have any openings in those walls. If you're greater than 3 feet and less than 5 feet on the left, non-sprinkler, you can see we need a 1 hour fire rating and openings have to be less than 25% of the wall area. On the right, we are greater than 3 feet. So that's as a sprinklered building on the right. No fire rating is required, no restrictions or openings. However, in San Diego, if you're in that very high fire hazard zone or brush management zone, you may have some requirements. So, but that is straight code. And so the code doesn't take into account the very high fire hazard zone, which is something that the state of California added to the state fire code. So that table we were looking at, you can see, let me see if I can get my little spotlight over here. See all these little things that say T302, that's table 302. That's what we were looking at the very beginning of class. So now let's see. We don't care about that right now.
It's in the code book?
No, this is out of the code check. This is in the very beginning. So I'll send you a couple pieces of this, but I wanted to look at the stuff out of chapter 3 first. This is all framing right here. Let me go through. So I'm just skipping by some of the framing stuff to go through some of the planning. Oh, yeah. I think this is where I want it to be. So let me just make double sure. Yeah. So let's go one more page. Hopefully we're not. So this is egress. Decks and balconies, stairways, winding stairs, and there's a bunch of little pictures here. But we'll look at. Yeah, maybe
Is this
it's
like
that.
a breakdown of the code and like for dummies or something?
Yes. Well, I don't know for dummies, but this has pictures, so I
I
don't
like
think.
pictures.
Okay, well
A lot of
that's
that
why.
makes a lot more sense.
Well, that's why I was trying to. This thing will stop.
Yeah, this is our book from Tuesday and Thursday.
Right.
Like it.
Well, yeah, this is the part of that book that we're not using for that class, but
Got it.
Are you still in class?
am I? Yes. Well, let me get rid of this little thing that seems to be bothering me. Well, I still got it. So now where was I? Oh, yeah. So I don't have control over all of this. So let's look at, see if I can pull this down a little bit. Went to the next page. Don't like the next page. Okay, this is just egress upper left-hand corner. We'll take a quick look at that. So you need a door with direct access, with direct exterior access to a public way is required. You can't have your only means of egress be through the garage. So you have to normally have a front door or a back door that meets the requirements. Need a net 32-inch width from face of door to stops. Hopefully, typically you have a 3-foot door, but with the stops, that's going to reduce it to less than 3 feet. And if you have doors like the ones in my house, none of the openings are square, none of the openings are plumb, and the doors have been shaved in various ways to make them fit. But they do have the 32-inch requirement. No key or special effort is allowed to operate egress doors from the inside. You can't have something like one of my associates, when I went to visit him, he was somewhere down in the hood. And when I knocked on the door to let me in, he had to stick his hand out of the security grill outside, put the key in the lock on the outside, and turn it in order to let me in. So that's not a code compliant from an egress standpoint. You're supposed to just be able to turn the knob or push the lever and leave. Hallways supposed to be at least 36 inches wide, and that's net clear. So if the dimensions on the plans are to face a frame or face a stud, they say 36. By the time they put a 1/2 inch of drywall on both sides and a little bit of texture, they're going to be down around 35 inches or less, and that is a problem. Landing length minimum 36 inches. So you got to have at least 3 feet. Talk about steps, but we'll look when we get over to stairways. We'll take a quick look at that. Decks and balconies. You can look at that a little bit. stairways, we'll look at in a minute. Winding stairways. So there are winding stairways, there are circular stairways, and there are spiral stairways in addition to regular stairways. So let me see if I can get this down a little bit without everything running wild. That looks good. Left-hand side, we see the stair profile. So the minimum tread depth is 10 inches, and that's measured from the nosing of the tread above to the nosing of the tread below. So you see at least 10 inches. If no nosing, then the minimum tread depth is 11 inches. So they've drawn a little picture there for you. So looking at that picture, the nose sticks out approximately an inch. So 3/4 minimum, 1.25 inches max. The reason they don't want the nosing to stick out too far is some clumsy people, like your instructor, get their toe caught when the nosing sticks out too far and they go to pick up their feet, they'll trip on that nose. It's also supposed to be rounded. That is for two reasons. One is if they're wood and it's a sharp 90-degree corner, it's going to splinter and break down. Number two, if you trip and fall, at least if it's rounded a bit, you're not going to concentrate the full force of the fall on a very
Corner.
tiny line and more likely crack your skull if you hit your head on the stairs. Handrails on the right of the stair profile. So minimum width, and this is a type 1. There are two different profiles for stairs. This is the more common one. Did you have something to say, Rick?
I was just going to ask, is there a maximum tread depth in residential?
Well, at some point, it's not a tread anymore. It becomes a landing. And I've seen a couple of lawsuits, at 3 feet, that's the dimension required for a landing. And a tread is supposedly 1 footstep at a time. But if you have a 3-foot deep tread, you're going to have to take more than 1 step to get up there. And so
Okay.
I see that comes up in lawsuits all the time. Where does a tread end and a landing begin? But
So you could have a 2-foot tread on your stair. If you had a big enough house, you could have a 2-foot tread.
You could. I'm not sure if they would consider that a stair anymore.
Okay.
So different places would look at it a little bit differently. I'd be a little reluctant because of the potential for a lawsuit. I think somebody's more likely to trip on something like that, but who knows? On a handrail, that vertical line on the left of the handrail picture, that is supposed to be the wall. So there's supposed to be an 1.5 inch gap minimum between the wall and the inside edge of the handrail. Handrail grip between 1.25 inches and 2 inches. Handrail height is supposed to be 34 to 38 inches above the nosing of the tread. And years ago, it was lower. So in the old codes, at one time it was, I think 30 to 34 inches was the handrail height. So the railing is supposed to be continuous within flights. So on the far right, they're showing a winding stair. And so the winding stair, you'll notice those ones around the bend are getting wider. And so that's a winder. And the problem that often occurs is right there at the inside edge, which is right here. A lot of people bring those to a point when they frame them on the jobs. And that is not right. You're supposed to have a minimum tread depth of 6 inches right along here. That's what they're trying to show you here, minimum 6-inch depth within shaded areas. So I've seen a lot of stairs get ripped out because they brought them to a point, which is a big no-no. Uniform depth of rectangular treads in same flight as winders is allowed to be different than uniform depth of winders at walk line. So, and that's what they're talking about right here. So this is the walk line that they're talking about, which is 12 inches from this handrail out, measured perpendicular from the handrail, the way this is shown. And then you need 10-inch minimum depth at the walk line. So these other ones are going to have it because the rectangular ones are the same.
Supposed to be uniform.
Yeah. Now, so interior stairs, we're supposed to have a landing top and bottom, including enclosed garages. At the top of the stair, where the stair does not swing over, there's an exception. So if the door swings out over the top step, that's a code violation. You're supposed to have a landing, and there's a max drop, typically of an inch. Headroom, minimum 6'8" measured from the nosing up. And at one time in the code, that was 6'6", but that has changed. So it's now 6'8". I don't care about that. And the minimum stairway width is measured above the handrail, and that's supposed to be 36 inches. So the handrail can encroach on that 36 inches. But once you get above the handrail, you need a minimum width of 36 inches. Handrail can project 4.5 inches into the space. And I think so lighting. So all stairways are required to have a light. Interior, exterior, that kind of makes sense. I don't want people tripping in the dark. Again, the IRC reference number is here, 303.7 and 8. If you have 6 or more risers, and you can count them, then you need a light at the top and bottom. Why they pick 6, I have no idea. But if you have more than 6 risers, you need a light switch at the top and bottom. So you're going to need a 3-way or a 4-way switch. Handrails, we went over. You need a grippable handrail if you have 4 or more risers. If you don't have 4 or more, you don't need one. I think the reason is at 4 or more risers. If they're at 7 3/4, you're going to be over 30 inches. Once you get over 30 inches above the ground, then you're supposed to have a guard, and they want a handrail on it. So leading up to it. Space between the verticals or horizontals. You're not supposed to be able to shove a 4-inch sphere through it up here on the railing, the handrail. For some reason, they've gone to 4 3/8. And down here at the bottom, where this little triangular piece is, you can actually have take a 6-inch sphere with you. What I do on inspections, if you take a Nerf ball, everybody familiar with the Nerf balls? You know, if it's,
Yes.
you know, those you might be able to take a great big one with you and push it down to 6 inches and pass it through. So, but 36-inch minimum guard. So I think that covers that. Again, this used to be lower. The space between the verticals at one time was 9 inches. Then they changed it to 6 inches. And now, for the most part, this 4 inches is what I'm usually looking for. If it's close, I'll measure it. If it looks okay, then most of the time it doesn't get measured. So
with the handrail, are you supposed to have an inside one attached to the wall also? If you have a freestanding one?
it's just supposed to be anchored in such a way that it can't roll over on you.
I mean, if you have one on the outside of the stairway as
Yeah.
the handrail guard, do you have to have a handrail along the wall also, or just one?
Well, you need this. If it's too tall, you're going to need to provide one. You know, if you can provide it on top of your little guard here, your handrail, you know, if that's at the right height, you're okay. But if a lot of times people will put a higher guard up here, they'll go with 42 inches rather than 36.
Right.
And if they put 42-inch high continuously, then you're going to have to mount a handrail on the guard.
Gotcha.
So, let me see if we got anything else down here. Now, commercial guards have to be at least 42 inches. Apartment houses, normally you're at 36 inches on stairs that serve more than, or serving multiple units. But this is also why decks, typically until they get 30 inches above grade, they normally aren't required to get a building permit. It's because it's at 30 inches above grade is when you need to have a guard, and then there's some specific requirements on the guard. So we don't care about that. We talked about all that. There's some child fall protection. So window openings, if you're more than 6 feet above the exterior surface below, then the window is supposed to be at least 24 inches AFF.
Above finished floor.
Yeah, above finished floor. And then they say except, those are except windows with openings restricted to less than 4 inches. So if they're less than 4 inches in either dimension, you don't have to worry about that. Or you've got some sort of fall protection device that complies with this particular ASTM. or opening control devices that meet that same standard. So this is an ASTM standard for, I'm not sure what that is, but I can take a quick look and see what the title is. So let's take a quick look. Maybe. Okay. And so I'll share this with you, maybe. Looks like this one. Okay, can you see that? ASTM International?
Yep.
Okay, well, this is the standard they're referring to. The 17, that's the most recent year that this particular thing was published. So it's got, look at that, 15 pages. It's going to cost you $56 if you need it. But if there's a lawsuit, this is where these things come up. The code refers to all these other documents. And if some kid falls out a window, the first thing the attorneys are going to do is have somebody take a look at this particular standard and decide if the installation complied or did not comply.
Yep.
And if they show it did not comply and it was supposed to have per the code, that helps their case quite a bit. So, and so there's a standard, and then the red line bundle, that's going to show what the old one was and what changes they made. So we could probably find an old one. See, here's one from 2010. And so this is why that's in the code. Can you see this?
Yep.
Why is window safety important?
3,300 children.
Yeah. So a third of them need to stay in the hospital. 8 are going to die.
Oh, wow.
Well, that's quite a little goose egg on the kid's head.
That is a goose egg. Wow.
So anyway,
Window screens will keep my child from falling. Yeah.
yeah, I doubt it. I doubt it. So anyway, we'll go back to the code. I'll see if I can find this again and send it out to you, but the attorneys love that stuff. So.
Yeah, there's those attorneys out there. A new building will open up and they run towards it and with their measuring tape and measure all the grab bars and windows and everything and look for a lawsuit right away.
Yeah. Now, where was I? Oh, I know what I need. I gotta go back and find this now. There we are. There we go. Happy days. Maybe. Yeah, here's our emergency escape and rescue. I'm experiencing some technical difficulties. You'll just have to excuse me for a minute. So emergency escape and rescue, any room that looks like a bedroom is a bedroom, could be used for a bedroom, is supposed to have emergency escape and rescue. And so this is what happens if you have a basement or a window well. You don't have a door to the outside or a window that goes directly to the outside, then you may have to provide one of these window wells. And if it's over 44 inches from here down to the bottom, then you need to provide a ladder on the wall. There's a minimum dimension of 3 feet outside. So from the exterior wall or the window opening to this vertical wall, that's got to be at least 3 feet. This ladder itself can't extend more than 6 inches into the required 3 feet. There's a minimum area for those things. And the emergency egress is right here. Minimum 20 inches wide for the window opening. That's with the window in the open position, clear 20 inches wide, not less than 24 inches high, and at least 5.7 square feet, which if you multiply the 20 inch by 24 inches, you're not going to get 5.7 square feet. So if it's minimum width, it's going to have to be taller than the 24. If it's minimum height, it's going to have to be wider than the 20 inches. And I'll send this one to you. So here's a little table. This is showing you that with a width of 20 inches, the height needs to be 41 inches. With a height of 24 inches, which is over here on the far right, then the window opening has to be at least 34.5 inches. So as a building inspector, you should be checking this at frame. The windows may or may not be in, but you should be looking at that sill. If the sill looks like, once they get the window in, it's going to be more than 44 inches above the floor, you got a problem. If it doesn't look like it's big enough to accommodate these dimensions after the window is in, you don't have a problem, but they have a problem. So what happened here? Somehow I jumped.
Yep.
What happened to me? So let me get rid of
I'm
this.
coyote hunting right now.
Pardon? What's going on?
What was that?
There we are. Now it's back. So, okay, anything else there? No. should be able to go to the next page. Maybe. And this is what we were talking about earlier too, with the garages and carports. Carport and garage floors are required to be non-combustible. Asphalt's okay at the ground level in a carport, because asphalt is combustible. Right? What's it made out of?
Tar.
Tar.
Oil.
So tar will burn. So
Oil.
particularly if it's soaked with gasoline. But concrete or asphalt, either one is okay. That's an exception. Carport has to have at least 2 or more sides open for it to be considered a carport and not a garage. And garage carport parking areas must slope to vehicle entry door or drain. So the California code requires 2 inches from the interior of the garage to the door. You need at least 2 inches of slope. Common wall, ceilings and penetration, we covered. Minimum of half inch is GB is gypsum board. On garage side, if we have habitable space above, we're supposed to have 5/8 gypboard. Decks from house to garage, minimum of 26 gauge and no openings directly into the garage. You can't have a garage that opens into a sleeping room. So you can't have a bedroom that has a door from the garage into the bedroom. And that's because
Really?
they're worried about carbon monoxide poisoning. 20-minute or 1 3/8 inch solid core door, that's all there. Habitability, we'll skip chimneys and fireplaces for now. But minimum light and vent, and again, this used to be 10%, now it's 8%. Habitable room natural ventilations, minimum of 4% of the floor area. Here's this bathroom thing. But again, under the California code, you have to have mechanical ventilation for a bathroom. You can't just use a window. And this used to be, I think 4 or 5 air changes per hour, but now they want 50. CFM stands for
Cubic feet per minute.
cubic feet per minute. Intermittent, which means that it's going on and off, or 20 cubic feet per minute if the fan is running continuously. The bathroom is required to exhaust directly to the outdoors and not into an attic or crawl space. You can borrow light and ventilation from another room. This often happens when people are adding a room on the back of the house and they're removing the window. But there has to be an opening between the 2 rooms that has to meet certain criteria. So 50% of the common wall between the 2 rooms has to be open. That opening has to be greater than 10% of the floor area of both rooms, and can't be smaller than 25 square feet. This continuous whole house ventilation, that's where you have the whole house is ventilated by centrally located fan. Room dimensions.
So it's got to be a minimum of 25 square feet, the light?
Yeah, if the opening, if you're borrowing it from another room, usually the 50% of the area is what controls,
Okay.
right? But if you had some narrow little thing going on, or you just wanted a hole in the wall, that 25 square feet normally is not what controls. It's usually this 50% of the common wall opening. Because if you have a, 8-foot high wall and it's 10 feet wide, then 50% of that is going to be uh,
200 square feet, so yeah,
yeah, so
it's a lot. So that's why you put a slider in if you open up, put an extra room on, huh?
yeah, well, that's why they have you put a cased opening, and then after the building inspector leaves, they come back in and
Fill
put
it
the
in.
slider in. That's when the slider goes in.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, habitable rooms, we already talked about minimum of 70 square feet, 7-foot ceiling heights. Slope ceiling rooms, we don't need to talk about that tonight, but you can look at that. And if you have questions, we can ask. This is a change. It used to be 7 feet. So now bathrooms, toilet rooms, and laundry rooms, you have to have a minimum ceiling height of 6'8". So that used to be 7 feet. And habitable rooms used to have a minimum ceiling height of 7'6". Non-habitable space in basements, you got to have at least a 6'8" ceiling. There is an exception that beams can project within 6'4" of the basement floor. But that's a little low for some people. There are lots of people that are 6'4" in their boots.
Only if I'm wearing Elton John boots.
Yeah. So, and then we have the interior wall covers, gypsum wall board. So you got to wait until the rough inspections are complete and the insulation. But here it says install only after building is weather protected, which means the roof should be on. And then the fastening is per this table here. You can look at the one they have referenced in the code. That's in this particular section, but ceilings and walls, orientation to the framing. So long dimension of the gypboard is perpendicular, or it could be parallel. Maximum spacing of the framing, studs or joists. And then if you're using nails, this is the spacing. If you're using screws, these are the spacing. And the screws are supposed to be type, they make 2 types, type S and type W. And so the screws for wood are supposed to be type W. I guess the W stands for wood. And if you're going into steel studs, then you use type S screws, which stands for the steel. Wet interior areas, and I'm assuming they're talking about bathrooms, saunas, spas, similar type things. And so we are looking for protection against mold and decay. And again, this ceramic tile in accordance with ANSI, that's American National Standards Institute. And again, we can do a web search on that. And it'll pop up and tell you how the tile needs to be installed.
Yeah, I think they did.
Water resistant chipboard. Now, if you're putting green board on the ceiling, you need 12-inch spacing on the framing because it's a little weaker, a little more brittle than regular drywall. And so that comes up once in a while. But I would recommend using something other than green board in a wet area.
Hardy backer.
Yeah. And so that's, I've seen the purple board, but I never paid much attention to it. Water resistant gypsum board, or purple board is what they're calling it here.
Yeah,
not
so my
allowed or
question
subject to
was,
direct water
if
exposure.
the study proved that it doesn't cause problems, why was it still removed from things if the results were interpreted that way?
Okay. So we're almost there. So here's a problem area: windows, doors, and garage doors. Performance and labeling. It says windows and doors have to be installed and flashed AMI. What's AMI stand for?
Stands for
According.
manufacturer's instruction.
Right. And so many of the windows and doors now require some sort of a sill pan be put in and very elaborate flashing. So the installation instructions for each window and door are supposed to be on the job site when the inspector shows up. Not usually not happening.
I was gonna say, I don't see that happen very often.
Yeah. They're talking here, anchor glass assemblies, AMI for design wind pressure. So a lot of times around swimming pools and decks, people want these cantilevered glass windshields. And so they just have a shoe at the bottom. And again, those need to be installed per the manufacturer's instructions. We don't care about that. Garage door wind test, not a problem here in San Diego, but if you're in Oklahoma or someplace where they get tornadoes, that's more important. The garage door openers, L&L stands for, anybody know?
It's not lot line, that's for sure.
Live and laugh, should be in your book. I think that's listed and labeled.
Let me see. Line separating lots. That's the
No,
only thing I have in here.
that's LL. There should be an L and L.
Oh, listed and labeled, yep,
Okay. So,
you're right.
and you need auto reverse the photo sensors. So that's so when the door comes down, if it hits something, it's supposed to pop back up. That's because at one time they were killing kids, dogs, and grandmas with electronic garage door openers. So it'd come down and just squish them. So can't do that anymore. Safety glass. So tempered glass. What you're looking for from an inspection standpoint is you're looking in the corner of the glazing, and somewhere there should be a little label that's etched into the glass.
So with the garage door openers, what's the maximum pound for before they trip?
I'd have to look at the standards. That's this UL 325.
Okay.
I'll try
Okay.
and look it up and see. It's not much though.
Oh, it's very light, I know, I just,
Yeah. So I'll take a look and report back. But hazardous locations requiring safety glazing or tempered glazing. So they list it here, but if you look over at these pictures, if you got a sliding glass door, that needs safety glazing. If you're within 24 inches of the hinge side of a door, you're supposed to have safety glazing if it's within 60 inches of the floor. Here, if you can't shove a 3-inch ball through that opening, which if there's a piece of glass there, I don't know how you could, but if the glass was not there, then that's exempt if it's very tiny. Over here, again, we're within 2 feet of the door. You're within 36 inches horizontal of a walking surface, and it's over a certain size and within a certain distance from the floor, then it needs to be safety glazing. So these are often questions that they will ask if you're applying for a building inspector job because this is a fire and life safety deal. If you have an old house like I do and you break one of the panels and it's not tempered, which the old ones weren't, if you have a company come out, they'll tell you that they got to replace both, because when you go back and start repairing or retrofitting the windows, legally they're required to bring the whole assembly up to code. So don't be surprised if that happens. And they don't show it, but wet areas. So in a tub or shower area, if you have glazing within 60 inches of the floor of the tub or shower, then it's supposed to be tempered glass. There's a couple other spaces there, so. And then the fire protection stuff. And I'll send you a copy of this just for your references. So this thing stops in a minute. It's moving on its own. So we talked about this. If you have enclosed usable area under stairs, it's got to be lined with 1/2-inch chipboard. It's supposed to hold the insulation back 3 inches from heat producing devices, or if you have a IC rated light, you can lay it right on top. Yeah, the fire blocking, as I said, material maybe 2x lumber, 1/2-inch chipboard. And there's a couple other things, but most commonly it's 2x lumber. Fire blocking locations where they're required. So you can read through that. So fire blocking of openings and penetration. So if we're drilling holes through things, again, they don't want fire to be able to spread. So you're supposed to come back and use some sort of caulking where this stuff comes up. So the caulking doesn't need to be fire rated in the International Residential Code, but in commercial applications, often it does need to be. It also says here, if you got more than 2 NM cables coming through a single hole and there's fire blocking, they must be derated. So, which means that you may have to go to up one size. So if it was 15 or 15 amp circuit, you might have to go to 20 amp cable. So, draft stopping, we talked a little bit about earlier. You can see all this stuff comes out of Chapter 3 of the International Residential Code. Carbon monoxide alarms and detectors. So required in new dwellings with fuel-fired systems or with attached garages. Now up in Berkeley, where they're banning gas to new houses, you won't have a requirement for carbon monoxide alarms because they don't have fuel-fired systems. You know, where they're required. So that's all. I'll send out a few questions on some of this stuff. And then smoke alarms. The original place for a smoke alarm, was centrally located in a hall outside the bedroom, but now you need it practically everywhere in the house. So
Every room.
Well, it said no smoke alarms within 3 feet of bathroom door. And a lot of times the smoke alarm, the bathroom door is off of a hallway, or at least one. So there is a requirement that it be at least 3 feet away from the bathroom door. So they're drawing a circle here. Distance to cooking appliances, it says 20 feet for ionization, 10 feet with a hush button, 6 feet for photoelectric. So anyway, that's that. So I will make a copy of a few of these pages and send those out to you. I'll ask you some questions, but I think for tonight, we're done. If you have questions or want to go over anything, I'll be happy to do that. If you'd like to stay, we can stay. But I think we've covered what I had hoped to cover for this evening. And then we'll get back into the regular inspection. But these are all things that you would typically do and be looking for at final inspection for the most part, but you have to start looking for them at frame. You know, has there a wiring circuit for the smoke alarms? Are they making provisions? Are the boxes there? These things, as you're walking through a frame, you're going to see a bunch of holes. Have they plugged this stuff up? Because once the drywall goes on, you're probably not going to be able to see it.
They still have to have a wired smoke fire alarm in a
Yes.
residence?
Yeah.
At least one, right?
Well, they're all of the new ones are supposed to be permanently installed. Where you're allowed to use the battery ones is with a retrofit, so a remodel.
Well, there's no battery anymore. They're all 10-year lithium ion, so you're not even supposed to be able to replace the
Okay.
batteries anymore.
Yeah, well, now you're supposed to replace the whole thing though every 10
Yeah,
years. So
Every 10 years, you got to replace the whole thing, right?
yeah, so I'll double check and see exactly what it says because I haven't looked at that recently, but I will take a look at that.
Yeah, it changed in the last couple of years.
Yeah, the other thing that it says is you either tie them all together or any one needs to be loud enough to be heard through the entire structure. And so I think more people die from heart attacks from the smoke detectors going off than probably die in the fires, but that could just be a misconception on my part.
Hey, Larry, question.
Yes.
Just to be clear, you haven't sent anything for this class, right? Like no quizzes, no homework?
Now, I think I sent, I sent some homework out.
I can't log into Canvas through my iPad.
Yeah, I'll double check, but I thought I'd sent something out, but I'll take a look.
I might be mistaken, but I have all I seen is the
Yeah,
and,
neither.
I'll send an email out tomorrow then because I thought I'd sent one thing out because somebody sent me something back on it.
Hey, thanks, Raul.
But I will double check.
you do get all your,
Why you keep asking those questions, young man?
yeah.
Yeah, no, I'll send something. I'll go through my records tomorrow and I'll send an email out with something in it. So
Yeah, I do know that on the Wednesday class we do the chapters for the
Yeah.
On this one I'm not slacking, but I haven't.
well, you're good.
Okay.
Like I said, I will go back and double check and we'll get
Yeah,
something
Canvas is
out.
more for me.
Yeah, recap, but we've got time. No, I don't have to turn grades in until late. I think actually They're giving me 3 or 4 weeks to get those in, so we've got additional time for the class too if we need it.
All right, perfect. Appreciate it.
Okay, I'm going to quit recording. I will get the